Hi everyone, thanks for watching this video. My name is Eric Connor and I'm a therapist here at Recovery Restore Counseling out in the suburbs of Chicago in Palatine. Today I want to record a video that we're titling, Why Do I Lose It Sometimes? Why do I lose it? Why is it that sometimes I'm just doing fine and then 30 minutes later, I'm yelling at someone, or I'm yelling at a colleague, or I'm raising my voice with my kids, or sometimes even getting worse, really dramatic about things. Why does that happen? Why am I like Jekyll and Hyde sometimes? So we're going to talk about this because it's something that happens to a lot of us, and there's actually some science behind it that we really want to understand if we're going to try to get better at it. So what are some common scenarios where this can happen? As I've talked to friends, as I looked at my own life, as I talk to clients, a lot of this can happen at work. We get an email from someone that we feel an immediate reaction when we read the email. Maybe it's critical, maybe it's implying something, but we're in a decent place, and then all of a sudden we're totally focused in on this email. And we may even have this impulsive thing to just right away shoot something back that's going to just take it to another level. Or we want to get on the phone and we want to attack them verbally. Sometimes this happens in meetings. It happens actually with the other person in person. We're talking and we're trying to work something out. Sometimes there's like a real issue that has to be resolved, but people have got feelings about it. And then as we're getting into it, next thing you know, we're starting to lose it, and this conversation is starting to go south quick. This happens in relationships, in marriages, in coupleships, where both people get into this activated state, and they're trying to engage in that state, but we are, in some very real way, we're kind of out of our mind, and we're saying things we don't mean. We're very hurtful. We're like bringing out the big cannons. And it can do a lot of damage. Another one that's really common and sometimes hurts the most is we do it to the people we actually care the most about. We do it with those we love the most. So we can do it with our partner, spouse. We can also do it with our kids. So maybe the morning is starting off great, but something's happening, and maybe one of our kids isn't kind of going with the flow, or is having a reaction, or not going to school, or whatever. And next thing you know, this thing that started off fairly innocently becomes a big deal, and the parent can even end up in a really activated place, yelling, shaming. And the hardest part about a lot of these things is that when we actually come out of this place and we get into kind of our right mind about it, we can feel loads of shame. We can feel really bad about what we've said, about how we've made other people feel. So it's kind of lose-lose. We go through this thing, we can end up saying things we regret, we hurt others, but then we come out of it and we can be loaded with shame and guilt. So let's talk a little bit about what this pattern is. Hopefully most of you can connect to something like this that's happened, or happens maybe more regularly. Maybe there's a particular situation that comes up, and we're now learning that that's something that kind of creates this dynamic we're talking about. So to start with, there's kind of a central nerve in our body which we call the vagus nerve. The word vagus, it actually comes from vagabond, which is also what we call kind of a wanderer, and that's just because of the way, sorry, a call just came in there, the way that this nerve comes in, it kind of comes from up here, from our parts of our cranium, and it works its way through. It actually connects a lot of our organs, and even like kind of down into our gut. I'm not totally expert on some of the physiological like locations of it, but the vagus nerve is a very important thing around how we regulate ourselves. And when we're in a kind of a safe, healthy place, we call that we're in a ventral vagal state. So right now, I feel like I'm in a ventral vagal state. I'm calm, except for the fact I'm doing a video and I'm a little nervous about that. I kind of know what's coming up. I feel generally in control of this day, of my situation, my surroundings. And when we're in this ventral vagal place, we usually have like a pretty big picture. Like I can kind of see the big picture of what's going on. So a good way to remember this is a little trick I use is I use the word view. So when you think of ventral, that's kind of like I can see the big view. I don't know if I'm making this big enough here. Okay, so that's where we're in our functional adult place. We want to be there. It's the healthy place that we have. And this is somewhat unique to humans in terms of this top level kind of functional, we can make decisions clearly, that is very helpful. Now sometimes throughout the day, we can get a little activated and we go into what's called the sympathetic system. Again, this is a separate system in our body. So the sympathetic nervous system, this is also what we have nicknamed fight or flight. So the ventral state almost works in tandem with the fight or flight. If you can imagine like a little bit like a seesaw. As one is kind of activated, the other one usually is not, and then vice versa. And throughout the course of a day, things happen that take us out of the ventral place and we shift into the sympathetic, the fight or flight. I call this sympathetic activation. So there's a part of our nervous system that's in charge, and then slowly something else is kind of taking over. And when we go deep into fight or flight, that's when we start to kind of lose it. So when we get into this fight or flight, when our sympathetic system is now getting really amped up and it's activated and it's taking over, we can only see what's right in front of us. We're irritable, we're angry, we can feel very anxious, and now we're in this reactionary mode. And a lot of times the fight response is to use rage or to use other things to try to, again, like kind of purge some of this energy and exert control. So this is actually very helpful. Now, let's say I'm driving down the road and a car's coming to hit me. Very quickly, unconsciously, my body will go into the sympathetic, and I will, if you were to watch my body, my heart rate would immediately increase. There'd be a lot of physiological changes taking, and I'd be extremely alert in preparation for whatever's coming on. But in other times of the day, other things can happen that we register as threats to us today that aren't quite like that. So if I'm going to be very late for something, that can feel like a threat. If I'm afraid that I'm going to disappoint someone, or I'm going to mess up, or my self-esteem could be hurt, sometimes those things register as threats, and those can actually start to activate us into the sympathetic system as well. So this is why this happens sometimes with kids, and it can actually even happen a lot with maybe kids in sports. Sometimes we see our child playing a certain sport, and we're feeling a big reaction, because actually, if we're introspective, sometimes it's because we think it's a reflection on us. And so we're feeling something uncomfortable, and that's why sometimes we can overreact to our child's performance and whatever it is that they're doing. This is a common thing. We don't mean to. It's an unconscious type of drive. But so for example, we can be a family in the morning, but if one child's kind of not complying, and now everyone's schedule is getting off, and I could be late for work, and I'm supposed to meet my boss at this time, but like you're not getting ready, and this, all that can kind of build up. And next thing you know, we're activated into our sympathetic system. Even though this is just kind of everyday stuff, it's registering as a threat, and now we are totally switching out of who we want to be, and we're going into kind of this fight mode. And that's generally why it happens. Now, different things will trigger different people. And there's another term that we talk about, which is called vagal tone. This is about kind of like how strong is that ventral place? How flexible is it? Some people can they have a lot of tolerance for the stress as it's building up. and they can kind of hang in there. They can stay patient for a while, longer than most. And I would say in these scenarios, that's just kind of what we call like vagal tone, good vagal strength. They do a great job of just really being flexible in that upper level. Some of us, though, don't have that. We have kind of a low bandwidth, but we pretty quickly drop fully into fight or flight, and it can happen quick. And when we're there, it's almost like a drug because it feels, even though we know it's destructive, there's something so powerful about it that it can almost feel good, even though we know it's so unhealthy what's happening in the moment. So some of us, we don't have a lot of flexibility. We don't have a lot of good vagal tone, and so we drop quicker into it, and we can go deeper into it. Meaning we don't just kind of put our toes into the sympathetic swamp. I just made that up. But we really can dive in, and now we're totally activated until we can find a way to get ourselves out of it. So vagal tone is something that can get better over time. When I'm working with guys that are, say, coming out of addiction, men and women, that are coming out of addiction, coming out of other things, our experiences can build some strength with that. We can get a little more flexible with life. We can develop tools emotionally, spiritually, with relationships that help us with that. Another important factor is that these things, because these are physical, there's a physicality to this in our body. These aren't just constructs, but we really do have these nervous systems, and we could point to them in a body. They're developed in the course of our childhood. Some homes do a better job of helping to develop a healthier kind of vagal tone than others. If you were in a home that was fairly traumatic, or you were in a home where you were on alert a lot, you're going to probably have a harder time not going into fight or flight. That's because you just didn't have enough healthy experiences to help develop that flexibility. When kids have, say, stressful periods, when they can come back to be nurtured, when they can have certain emotional experience, if they have attunement, if they are well attached to their parents or to their family, these are generally things that can help with that tone, with that strength in adulthood. If our homes were generally calm and there were low levels of adrenaline and cortisol in all of us in that family, that helps. But if we grew up in homes that are on high alert, if you grew up and you had kind of higher cortisol, higher stress hormones in your body, then as an adult, you'll probably have a harder time. Not always, but we see that pattern. So this is just setting the stage for what this is about. Now, the main thing I do want to leave you with is please don't add to the shame of when this happens. Like I said, most of us, we feel terrible when this happens to those closest to us. It doesn't help to now just heap shame on ourselves. I would prefer that we try to take the pain and we really learn from it, and we make some commitment to how we're going to do it differently. So any tough experience we have with our families, with life, if we somehow take it and we're going to commit to now do something differently because of it, then that pain can actually end up being productive. It's when we sit in shame and we don't maybe do some good analysis of it, then it's probably going to happen again, and then we can feel like, no, I'm just flawed and I can't change this. But we can work on it. So the next video, we're going to talk about what do you do, both before and in the middle of it, that can help to mitigate the damage done. But what I'd like for you to do until then, next week, is to try to think about when this has happened to you, or when does it happen to you. So the first step is to know these are the general criteria, these are the general scenarios that I know I'm at high risk, that I'm going to kind of have a big reaction. Because the main thing we're talking about, it's not about our frontal cortex and making a decision. This is something that's coming from our body that is powerful, and it's deep, and it's really unconscious initially. So like hunger, very few people can use just mind power to take hunger away. We have to address it It's a primal thing. And this fight or flight response is also a primal mechanism inside of us. So the goal isn't to outthink it. The goal is to understand it, understand when it's coming on, and to work with your body around that, which we're going to focus on next time. So be aware of your situations. Be aware of the triggers for it. Don't beat yourself up. You're watching this video, and hopefully we can learn something about it, and we'll get better. So with that, thanks so much. Have a great week. Feel free to email me if you want to have any questions directly, eric@recover-restore.com. Otherwise, we'll have another video next week. Thanks so much.